Hey guys, if you're brand new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and definitely ring a ding ding that bell notification button. It helps the channel grow and it helps me bring you guys a lot more.
Creatures may stand in your way and be your lunch. You'll also have many allies, even Bulma. Two brave warriors, fast-kicking Krillin and sword-swinging Yamcha and his evil fighters.
Dragon Ball, action figures and collectible figures from Bandai.
Can you believe it, guys? It's been 11 years now since the launch of the line, and I think it's safe to say we're seeing more Figuarts releases than we know what to do with. Seriously, at the time of this video, September 2022, there are over 115 figures in the line. Now mind you, some of these are re-releases, but still impressive nonetheless, especially when compared to other lines which I think had great potential. Pokemon D-Arts. In 2022, SH Figuarts has finally gone cross-universe, and not just in the main canon, but I mean it's covering Dragon Ball GT and even content from the video games as well. And if you go back and watch some of the future Figuarts videos I did, not only are we seeing characters from those videos made, but it seems like some of the wishes and suggestions we had for these releases were taken into account. The only way things should get even crazier is if they release 3.0 body molds, although at which point I think many of us would just pass it from the awesomeness and just tap out and stop collecting these things altogether. Anyways, enough of this intro, let's dive right back in. We have a lot of ground to cover. So wrapping up 2019, we had two figures repping the OG era in Dragon Ball itself, with one of those figures being Demon King Piccolo. This figure had quite the stark contrast to any previous Piccolo figure in the line, especially in the sense that it was the first real look at what a Namekian 2.0 mold would look like. It featured vibrant, more saturated color schemes, as with the rest of the 2.0s in the line, and it literally stood out among Piccolo figures because it was larger than them. Appropriate dad vibes for Piccolo right there. As far as representing his anime counterpart, the figure did that well, having enough anime-accurate expressions to convey the character on the shelf. And the next figure wrapping up 2019 did so as well, with it being Adventure Begins Bulma. This figure did not fall short aesthetically, even featuring a pair of panties for Kid Goku to have a peek at. Gotta love the minds of Tamashii, I guess. Although the character itself is not brand new to the line, it helped bolster the female figure ranks, and it rounded out with a nice 2-star Dragon Ball for collectors, making it the 6th ball release in total. All in all, a safe release for nostalgic fans and a quieter way to end the year. Now in 2020, as we all know, it brought with it some pretty big things, and one of those things was a release of a figure that many pined for since his appearance in the anime, and that is Jiren. This hulking brute came in and representing the big bad of the Tournament of Power arc well. Visually, you couldn't mistake the character for who he was, especially with the red and black jumpsuit. As far as the line went at this point, good guys definitely outnumbered villains, but if you wanted to count Jiren in that aspect, he helped fill out the other side quite well, and literally. Coming with the usual accessories and never before seen flame effect, he was a welcomed addition to the line from fans, albeit lacking slight shading on the figure itself, but it's not exactly a new problem for the figures. Now speaking of arc villains, up next was another throwback to the OG Dragon Ball days in General Tao. Now if you're like me, you weren't super psyched about this release, but that isn't to say that it was a bad one by any means. It did a fantastic job representing its anime counterpart and featured a few accessories we didn't have. And he also featured the coveted 7-star Dragon Ball, finally completing the set for those who invested in Shenron years ago. Overall, a very solid release, right down to the paint apps and articulation assisted by the alternate V parts. Now the next release here needed no real introduction, and was another one fans were thirsting for more than an influencer and the like button, and that was Ultra Instinct Goku. Now this figure did the job, and it did it quite well. As it was repping Goku's ultimate form at the time, it not only killed the look with the paint apps, but accessories as well. Tamashii probably knew that they had to do a stellar job on this release, and that's what they did. The decision to have its battle damage as seen in the anime was portrayed by the slight detailed scratch marks that we've seen with other battle damage figures. Probably one of the most memorable releases in the line, especially for those just joining, and one that would definitely stand out amongst all the other Gokus released thus far. Another figure representing the Dragon Ball days was released in the likes of Jackie Chun, aka Roshi in alternate clothing. While I won't spend much time on this release, it wasn't a bad one, and definitely offered its fans a solid collectible for the iteration of the character. Now, zooming right back into the meat and potatoes of the line being Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super, Kaioken Goku was released afterwards, albeit he was not the first attempt at a Kaioken Goku in the line. If you remember, the first one was released in 2017. This figure was quite different though. It featured some new articulation in comparison despite still utilizing the 1.0 body mold, and a different head sculpt more akin to the one seen during a power-up. The figure as a whole had a rose tint to it and a satin gloss on the clothes, as well as the hair. This offered collectors another chance to grab an iconic look for Goku, and it would mesh well with another release later that year. As Tamashii tends to do, we saw the release of yet another Goku in the form of Kid Goku in his blue gi, or Adventure Begins Goku, pairing nicely with the earlier Bulma and Jackie Chun. Again, there was nothing drastically different about this release compared to other Kid Goku figures in the line, so I won't spend too much time on it here and move right along to the next. Now 2020 started interesting and continued this year with the release of Captain Ginyu. This figure was a mold breaker. No other figure could share its head sculpt, and what's more, he came with a 4-star Namekian Dragon Ball. This was perfect as a counter release to the previous Kaioken Goku. The Namek saga was finally getting some more love from the line. The figure not only killed it aesthetically, but its articulation allowed collectors to recreate almost all of his wacky poses from the anime. Truly a warmly welcome addition to the line, who is still widely available today, believe it or not. Now of course, with 2020 bringing it with it some very unique and interesting circumstances through COVID-19, nobody could go to Comic-Con that year. However, that didn't mean there weren't exclusives. 2020's exclusives came in the form of 3 figures, UI signed Goku, as well as androids 17 and 18. Now while the androids weren't on a 2.0 body mold yet, they were a welcomed addition by those who couldn't afford them, as they came out quite early on in the line and never made reappearances since, much like Android 16 at the time. As for Goku, this was a repaint that also had the benefit of depicting a slightly different form for collectors to display. What's more is that this release also had a unique face in the form of Goku with his eyes closed, and it was a battle damaged figure, but his undershirt was still intact. All of these exclusive features the stellar paint jobs and denser plastic than the typical releases seen in the line. Definitely a brighter point of the year for 2020, all things considered. Summer of 2020 also gave birth to another female figure who made her first appearance in the line through Kid Chi-Chi. Again, a huge release for sentimental OG Dragon Ball fans who could continue to fill out the core roster. She came with a Dragon Ball as well as the rest of the figures typical of this era, and was a welcomed addition for those fans. Now, as 2020 was coming to its ending crescendo, Tamashii mirrored that with the most colossal figure in the line to date. What made them release this? I don't think we'll ever know. But it's one that I said that would be a mold breaker in an older video, and it truly was. That figure being Grade 8 Vegeta. For those collectors who complained the Saiyan saga never quite got enough attention, well, it sure did now. The figure stood almost 13 inches tall. That's bigger than some people's feet, and more. And it kept the overall quality of the SH Figuarts release. Truly astounding. This figure not only came with swappable parts like its brethren, but it also included miniatures of Goku for him to crush, as well as Yajirobe. Sadly, I don't think we'll see his own Figuarts form unless he's released in a 2-pack with like a battle damaged Krillin or something. If you could afford it, this was a monumental release that could not be missed out on. Now, as if wanting to go from the show's beginnings in Z to its endings at the time in Super, the final 3 releases of 2020 were all nods to the anime's progression into Dragon Ball Super. Now, as we know, 2020 marked a notable time in history, and this affected Figuarts too, with shipping delays running rampant, resulting in collectors receiving their figures anytime between November and December 2020. Now first up, let's talk about Vegito Blue 2.0. If you weren't fortunate enough to pick up this SDC version of Vegito before, now was your chance to do so, and with good reason, as he received the 2.0 tech on the body. Much like his predecessor, he was still an exclusive of sort, that being a premium Bandai exclusive, which made him, along with Zamasu, the first to be offered in North America in this way. He came with some serious upgrades though, and I don't just mean the paint apps. His light sword energy effect part was done better, and along with that, he featured a charge effect which is most likely depicting his final Kamehameha charge as seen in the anime. This figure definitely rocked, and it made a lot of fans happy to have. There are often arguments between Vegito and Gogeta, but as far as this is concerned, this version of Vegito definitely beats the older one. Now, as mentioned, Vegito was paired with the release of Zamasu. Now, while this release was very minimalistic, it was still a core character from the Goku Black arc. Its sculpt was on point and it had great paint apps. However, it was very tame and really didn't feature any accessories. But if you were a completionist or a fan of the Goku Black art, this figure was for you. Now, the last figure to mention in wrapping up 2020 was a battle damaged Jiren, labeled Final Battle Jiren. This finally offered collectors a chance to depict any of Goku and Jiren's battles in the Tournament of Power on their shelves, and was arguably the more detailed and aesthetically interesting Jiren to look at on the shelf. He featured a single Ki Blast effect part and a matted paint job, which rounded out the appearance of a very solid release to cap off the year of 2020. Now, in my opinion, 2020 was sort of a pivotal point in the line. We just saw the ramping up of releases that increased into 2021 and even today in 2022. I don't know what it was. Maybe the quarantine just allowed people to work from home that much more and kind of put their heads together and say, hey, let's release a whole bunch of figures now. No one's got anything else to do. No one's going anywhere. Or maybe it was just the line doing so well at the same time as such a terrible time in the world. And needless to say, you'll see in 2021, things definitely took a different turn. After a big bang attack ending to 2020, came 2021, a year full of coming in and out of quarantines like a bipolar introvert. But with the start of the year, it made a return to everyone's favorite green planet full of slug people. I can't wait to dive into that one with you guys in the next part. Stay tuned, and you know what I always say, may the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Peace.